Hello, and welcome back to Velvet Haunt. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy chilling tales that linger in the velvet dark, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare. Relax your mind. Let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1, I do not really know how to begin this. My name is Henry Cartwright. I'm 26 years old, and I have a story to tell. I have never told anyone the whole truth about what happened. I have tried many times, but every time I come close, I lose my nerve. God knows I should have spoken sooner, but I was terrified of what people would think. I was afraid they would lock me away again. Maybe they still will after this. What happened took place 2 years ago. It did not happen only to me. There were 8 of us when we entered that jungle. As far as I know, only 3 of us ever came out alive. I am one of them. The other 2 will not speak to me, and I cannot blame them. For the last 2 years, I have lived with a kind of guilt that never goes away. It follows me into every room. It sits beside me when I try to sleep. It waits for me when I wake up. Sometimes I feel like it is inside my chest, pressing down harder every day. I am telling this now because I do not know how much longer I can continue like this. I do not know whether speaking will help me or destroy what is left of me. I only know that I cannot keep it hidden anymore. Before I begin, there is something you must understand. You probably will not believe me. I do not expect you to. I am not asking for your trust, your sympathy, or your forgiveness. Honestly, I could not care less whether anyone believes me. I am doing this for myself. I am doing it for the people who died. I am doing it for the other 2 survivors who still have to live with what happened. I will tell you everything I can. You will judge me. Even if you think I am lying, you will still judge me. When you hear what I did, you may hate me. That is fine. I have hated myself every day since I came out of that jungle. For the past 2 years, I have used alcohol and drugs to numb my memories. Sometimes I drink until I cannot remember my own name. Sometimes I take enough pills to make the walls melt around me. For a few hours, I can almost convince myself that I was never there. But forgetting only makes it worse. When the memories return, they return all at once. I have received all the mental health support anyone could ask for. I have been in and out of psychiatric hospitals. I have met more doctors than I can remember. I have been given pills to help me sleep, pills to stop the panic attacks, pills to control the nightmares, and pills that were supposed to make me feel normal again. None of them worked. How can doctors help you when you cannot tell them what really happened? As far as the doctors know, 8 foolish adults traveled into one of the most dangerous parts of the world without proper preparation. They believe we got lost in the rainforest. They believe we were attacked by local people, wild animals, or armed groups. That is the story the authorities accepted. That is the story the world accepted. They do not know how dangerous that jungle truly is. They do not know what lives beyond the fence. That is the real reason I am speaking now. As long as that place still exists, and as long as nobody understands what it is, none of us are safe. I went into the real heart of darkness. The local people called it the Asili. This began 2 years ago when I was living a fairly comfortable life in North London. I worked in a restaurant, waiting tables and washing dishes. It was not the future I had once imagined for myself, But that is what happens when you drop out of university without a plan. Still, my life was not terrible. I had a small flat. I watched football every weekend. I had a few friends I saw after work. London was loud, crowded, and expensive, but it had a strange energy. People from every part of the world lived there. Sometimes it felt like the entire planet had been squeezed into one city. Then I received a message from my former girlfriend, Nydia. She was studying in the United States at the time. We had tried to keep our relationship going from a distance, but it slowly fell apart. Calls became shorter. Messages became less frequent. Eventually, we stopped calling each other boyfriend and girlfriend. When her message appeared on my phone, I was shocked. She asked whether we could have a video call. I agreed immediately. Like an idiot, I thought she wanted us to get back together. When her face appeared on the screen, all the feelings I had tried to bury returned. She smiled when she saw me, and for a few minutes, we spoke like nothing had changed. She told me she missed me. I told her I missed her too. Then she explained why she had called. Nydia had joined a student activist group in the United States. They called themselves BADS. I never learned what those letters stood for. They fought for equal rights involving race, gender, and other social issues. I had nothing against what they believed. Most of it sounded reasonable. The problem was what they planned to do. Nydia told me that she and several members of the group were traveling to Africa. More specifically, they were going to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. They intended to start their own commune deep inside the rainforest. I remember staring at her through the screen and wondering whether she was joking. She was not. I told her it sounded completely insane. Nydia admitted that it probably did, but she tried to explain their thinking. According to her, the world was not becoming fairer. Governments were corrupt, societies were divided, and people were too selfish to create real change. Her friends had asked why they should keep trying to repair a broken world when they could build their own community somewhere else. Their answer was to create a peaceful commune in what they called a natural paradise. I told her that a country damaged by war, disease, poverty, and political violence did not sound much like paradise. She said I was looking at it in a negative way. Maybe to an American student who had never left the United States, any distant rainforest sounded magical. Then Nydia told me they did not have enough people. She asked whether I would come with them. I laughed. At first, I thought she had to be joking. When I realized she was serious, I said no. I said no several times. I told her I had no interest in leaving London to live in the middle of a jungle. Then she told me something else. She said the real reason we had broken up was because her friends had been planning this journey for a long time. She believed the commune would become her new life, and she did not think our relationship could continue while she prepared to leave. She said she still loved me. She said she wanted us to be together again. Hearing those words should have made me happy, but the whole conversation felt wrong. This was not the Nydia I remembered. Nydia was intelligent. She was one of the smartest people I had ever known. She cared deeply about politics and social justice, and sometimes she became too involved in causes. Even so, traveling into the Congo to build a commune seemed extreme, even for her. I told her I needed a week to think. A week later, against every bit of common sense I had, I agreed to go. I did not say yes because I wanted to live in the jungle. I did not believe the commune would succeed. I said yes because I still loved her. More than that, I was worried. I thought she and her friends would get into serious trouble. I imagined them reaching the rainforest, discovering how impossible their plan was, and returning home within a few weeks. I wanted to be there in case something went wrong. Maybe that made me just as foolish as the rest of them. We were all fools. A few months later, after getting vaccinations and taking medication to prevent malaria, I stood inside Heathrow Airport with a backpack and a one-way ticket to Kinshasa. My older sister, Ellie, begged me not to go. She told me I was putting myself in danger. I agreed with her, but I felt I had no choice. Nadia was going, and I could not let her face that danger alone. Ellie had practically raised me. Our parents were never reliable, and our home life had been difficult. She was more like a mother to me than a sister. Saying goodbye to her was harder than I expected. I promised I would be safe. I promised I would return. She hugged me tightly and said, "You better." I wish I had listened to her. The strange things began before I even reached Africa. The flight was long, so I tried to sleep. At some point over Europe or North Africa, I had a dream. In the dream, I was already inside the rainforest. I was not walking. I was floating through the trees as though I were watching footage from a nature documentary. Branches, leaves, and vines moved past me. I could hear insects and distant birds, but I could not see any animals. Then I reached a barrier. It stretched through the jungle in both directions. It was made from long wooden spikes placed across one another, forming a row of rough X shapes. Beyond the barrier, the jungle was completely black. It was not the darkness of night. It was something thicker, as if light itself could not enter. I should have wanted to move away. Instead, I wanted to cross. Something beyond the fence was calling me. I could not hear a voice, but I felt it pulling me forward. I was terrified, but I was also excited. I began moving through the barrier. The moment I entered the darkness, I woke up. I was still on the plain, covered in sweat. My heart was beating so hard that my chest hurt. I went to the toilet and splashed cold water on my face. As I looked at myself in the mirror, one thought repeated inside my head. I do not want to do this. I wanted to land in Kinshasa, find the first flight back to London, and go home. To this day, I do not know why I stayed. When the plane landed, I worked my way through the airport and searched for Nadia and her friends. Their flight had arrived earlier. We needed to meet by 1 in the afternoon because we had a riverboat to catch at 3. I finally found them waiting outside the terminal. They looked impatient, but Nadia's face changed when she saw me. She ran over and hugged me. We kissed. For a short time, all the fear I had felt on the plane disappeared. Then she introduced me to the group. I was surprised there were only 6 other people. I had imagined a much larger organization, but then again, how many reasonable people would agree to live in a rainforest? The women were Beth, Chantal, and Angela. Beth and Angela were a couple. Chantal was Naedia's closest friend. Even though we had never met, Chantal hugged me like we had known each other for years. The men were Ty, Jerome, and Moses. Moses was the leader. He was tall and muscular, with a broad chest that made him look like an American football player. He wore a large gold cross around his neck. Moses was not his real name. It was simply the name he had chosen for himself. He considered himself some kind of spiritual leader. From the beginning, he disliked me. Whenever he spoke to me, he called me names like Oliver Twist or Mary Poppins. Sometimes he copied my accent, making me sound like a chimney sweep from an old film. Jerome followed Moses everywhere. He repeated everything Moses said and laughed whenever Moses laughed. It was like he had no personality of his own. Then there was Ty. Ty was good-looking. Even I could see that. He had short dreadlocks that reached his neck. He dressed in loose clothes and carried himself with quiet confidence. He was the only one of the three men who shook my hand. Even then, it did not feel friendly. It felt like someone had told him he had to do it. Everyone in the BADS group was black. Angela and I were the only white people. Angela was not officially part of the group. She had only come because she was Beth's girlfriend. She was a little older than the rest of us and had served in the military. It was easy to believe. She had short hair, a strong build, and the calm behavior of someone who knew how to handle dangerous situations. She did not speak much, but I felt safer knowing she was there. Moses wanted to create what he described as a black utopia. His argument was that humanity began in Africa, so Africa was the natural place for African Americans to create a new society. My presence and Angela's clearly did not fit his plan. Moses treated me with open dislike. Ty's hatred felt different. Sometimes I caught him staring at me with an expression that made me wonder what I had done to him. I would not learn the reason until later. From Kinshasa, we traveled to the Congo River. The river was so large that it made the Thames look like a narrow stream. Near the city, it was filled with fishing boats, canoes, and crowded ferries. A man waited for us beside an old wooden motorboat. He spoke only French. Moses spoke enough French to discuss the price and pay him. We loaded our supplies and climbed aboard. The journey upriver took several days. At first, it was almost enjoyable. I spent time with Nadia, and it felt as though we were together again. We spoke about London, her university, and the life we hoped to build. The scenery was unbelievable. We passed villages, boats, fishermen, and crowded river towns. At one point, we stopped in Mbandaka to purchase food, tools, and other supplies. After leaving Mbandaka, the world changed. Civilization slowly disappeared behind us. The river became surrounded by endless rainforest. Everything was green. The trees looked ancient, and the air seemed to come from another time. It felt like we had traveled backwards into the age of dinosaurs. Someone mentioned a legendary creature said to live in the Congo Basin. It was supposed to be something like a living dinosaur, similar to the Loch Ness Monster. The name sounded like Mokele Mbembe. I could not decide whether I wanted to see it. I had hoped we would see wildlife. Nadia said there might be elephants or hippos. We heard monkeys and birds in the trees, but rarely saw them. The only large animals we saw clearly were crocodiles resting on the riverbank. I was terrified of them. For the rest of the journey, I avoided standing near the edge of the boat. The heat was unbearable. The humidity made breathing difficult. Rain fell during much of the journey, and during the final 2 days, it barely stopped. We were soaked constantly. The farther we traveled, the narrower the river became. Soon, it was barely wide enough for a single boat. The driver began moving faster around the bends. None of us understood why he was suddenly in such a hurry. Then, we rounded one corner and saw a man standing on the bank, waving. He had been waiting for us. This was Fabrice, our guide. Moses had arranged for him to lead us through the rainforest to the location where the group planned to build the commune. The boat driver accepted the rest of his money. Then, without saying goodbye, he turned the boat around and sped away. It looked as though he could not leave fast enough. That made me nervous. We began walking through the rainforest. The journey lasted several days. The humidity beneath the trees was even worse than it had been on the river. Mosquitoes surrounded us constantly. They entered our clothes, bit our faces, and covered every exposed part of our bodies. Several of us developed severe diarrhea. We stopped again and again so someone could disappear behind a tree. On the final day, the rain fell harder than ever. I could not decide whether I was freezing or burning alive. My clothes were soaked, my feet hurt, and my backpack felt heavier with every step. We were all exhausted. Then Fabrice stopped. He stood completely still, staring ahead. Moses and Jerome asked what was wrong, but he did not answer. He slowly began stepping backwards, as though he had reached the edge of a cliff. "I go back," he said. "You go." "You go." "I go back." Moses tried to convince him to continue. He offered him more money. Fabrice refused. He was clearly terrified. Before leaving, he gave us a map and explained how to reach the clearing where we planned to settle. He wished everyone good luck. Then he looked directly at me. "Good luck, Arsenal," he said. Fabrice loved football. I had given him my Arsenal cap earlier during the journey. The way he spoke made me feel that he was not wishing good luck to the group. He was wishing it specifically to me, as if I needed it more than anyone else. Later that day, we reached the clearing. The rain had stopped. The space was surrounded by thick rainforest, but the ground itself was open enough for us to build. When we realized we had finally arrived, we dropped our backpacks and collapsed. The clearing was strangely quiet. Birds called from the trees. Somewhere nearby, water moved over rocks. We later found a stream not far from the camp. Over the next few days, we recovered our strength and began making plans. We raised our tents and discussed shelters, food, clean water, and protection. Moses tried to act as though he understood everything, but it was obvious he had no idea what he was doing. None of us did. The only exception was Angela. She said we needed a defensive perimeter. She set up tripwires and simple warning traps around the clearing. She found fish in the nearby stream and promised to teach us how to catch them with spears. She also showed us how to make basic bows, arrows, and hunting weapons. It seemed there was nothing she could not do. Without Angela, I doubt any of us would have survived more than a few weeks. Throughout the journey, the dreams continued. Every time I slept, I returned to the same jungle. I floated through the trees until I reached the wooden fence. Beyond it waited the same unnatural darkness. Each time I wanted to cross. I did not understand why. The darkness terrified me, but I felt that something inside it was waiting for me. On the third night at the commune, the dream changed. This time, I was already on the other side. I could walk. The darkness surrounded me. I could barely see the trees, branches, and vines. Then I noticed a light around 20 meters ahead. I moved toward it, but walking felt difficult, the way movement sometimes does in dreams. No matter how hard I tried, the light seemed far away. Eventually, I reached it. I stepped through and found myself inside a circular clearing. The circle was almost perfect. Thick green plants surrounded its edges. In the center stood a dead tree. Only the trunk remained. Its wood was dark, almost black. Long roots stretched across the ground like giant snakes, following the curve of the clearing. A narrow path led toward it. I walked forward. The closer I came, the larger the tree seemed. The stump rose high above me like a tower. Its shadow fell over me. For a moment, I felt swallowed by darkness. Then the shadow moved away, as though an invisible sun was turning somewhere behind the jungle. A face appeared on the tree. It was carved into the bark. The face looked like an African mask. It was round, with narrow slits for the eyes and mouth. Somehow it was clearly suffering. I could feel its pain. It was the most unbearable pain imaginable, like being stabbed thousands of times while your skin was slowly removed. Then something touched my ankles. I looked down. The ground was covered in severed hands. There were hundreds of them. Some were small. Others were large. They lay across the entire clearing. I tried to lift my feet, afraid of stepping on them. The hands began to move. Their fingers twitched. Then they crawled across the ground like spiders. Several reached my legs and began climbing. I wanted to scream. I wanted to kick them away, but my body would not move. Hands crawled over my skin and beneath my clothes. Their fingers pressed against me from every direction. An unbearable weight dragged me to the ground. As I fell, I heard a zipper opening. I woke inside the tent. A bright light shone into my eyes. Moses, Jerome, and Ty were looking inside. Each held a wooden spear. They told me to get dressed because I was going fishing with them. Nydia became angry and told them it was too early. Normally, I hated mornings, but after that dream, I did not want to remain in the dark tent. I dressed and followed them. The four of us stood in the stream for almost half an hour without catching anything. Then a fish moved toward me. The others began shouting, "There it is. Get it. Go on." I tried to spear it, but the fish was too fast. Their yelling made it worse. The fish escaped downstream. The three of them laughed and called me useless. I lost my temper. Since the journey began, they had mocked my accent and told me nobody wanted me there. I had heard them say they could not understand what Nydia saw in the white British man. I told them to catch their own fish. As I turned away, Jerome shouted, "Snake! There's a snake near your leg." I panicked. I lifted my feet, lost my balance, and fell into the water. The three men burst into laughter. There had never been a snake. I stood up and moved toward Jerome. I wanted to hit him. He was larger than me and probably knew how to fight, but I no longer cared. Before I could reach him, Ty stepped between us. He told me to stop. I pushed him aside. Ty immediately shoved me backwards with far more force. It was obvious he had been waiting for an excuse to fight me. Before either of us could throw a punch, we heard Angela shouting, "Guys!" She stood above the stream, holding a well-made spear with several fish on it. We stared at her, expecting her to yell. Instead, she told us to follow her. She had found something. We walked through the jungle behind her. Moses kept demanding to know where we were going. Angela said she could not explain because she did not understand what she had seen. Then we reached it. The fence stretched through the jungle from one direction to the other. It was exactly the same fence from my dreams. Sharp wooden spikes crossed one another in an endless row of X shapes. But the real fence was worse. Dead animals had been tied to it. Monkey skulls hung from the wood. Pieces of rotting flesh and animal organs were wrapped around the spikes. Flies covered everything. The smell was unbearable. Everyone stared in shock. I recognized the fence, but I still did not understand it. Then I looked beyond it. The jungle continued on the other side, but only for a short distance. Behind the first line of plants was complete darkness. It looked like the entrance to a cave large enough to swallow the entire forest. Moses and Angela began arguing about what the fence meant. Then we realized we were not alone. 5 men stood around 15 meters behind us. They were very short, almost the size of children, but their bodies and faces belonged to adults. Their clothes were dirty and torn. Each carried a weapon, a spear, bow, machete, or knife. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Moses called out, "Hello?" He took Angela's spear with the fish and walked toward them. We told him to stop. He ignored us. One of the short men stepped forward. He appeared to be their leader. When they were only a few meters apart, Moses began explaining that we were Americans and meant no harm. He spoke slowly and loudly, as though talking to a child. Then he offered the fish as a gift. The man stared at the fish with an insulted expression. He looked past Moses and directly at me. For a long time, he watched me. I wondered whether he had ever seen a white person before. Something told me that was not the reason. His eyes became wide. "Our fish," he shouted. "You take our fish." We stepped backwards toward the fence. Moses remained where he was. The man pulled out a machete and pointed toward the barrier. "No safe here." He yelled, "You go home, go back America." The men behind him began shouting and waving their weapons. One word repeated again and again. "Asili. Asili. Asili." Moses tried to approach the leader. The man raised his machete. Moses lifted both hands and slowly backed away. When he reached us, we began moving toward the commune. The men continued shouting. The moment the trees hid us from their view, we ran. When we returned, we told the others what had happened. Everyone panicked. We discussed the fence for hours. Angela believed it marked the boundary of a hunting area. The dead animals were probably there to frighten outsiders. That explanation made sense. The problem was that I had dreamed of it before I ever saw it. I told nobody about the dreams. We voted on whether to stay or leave. Everyone except Moses wanted to go. Moses refused. The commune had been his idea. He believed it would prove something to the world. Even after being threatened with a machete, he was determined to stay. He said we were not leaving. The argument became louder and more aggressive. Then, Angela took control. She told everyone to shut up. She said none of us had been prepared for this journey. None of us understood the jungle. We were going home, and that was not open for debate. If Moses wanted to remain, he could, but he would die alone. Moses said he was willing to die for the cause. By the time darkness fell, even he seemed less certain. We agreed to begin the journey back in the morning. Despite everything, I eventually slept. I returned to the fence. I passed through it and entered the darkness. Again, I found the circular clearing and the black tree. The carved face was gone. The tree seemed ordinary, apart from its size and color. Then I heard breathing. It came from the trunk. Each breath was slow and painful, like someone suffocating. I looked around for the severed hands, but the ground was empty. When I looked up, I saw someone attached to the tree. He was small, almost child-sized. His arms were stretched outward, and his body had been fixed to the trunk. He had been crucified against it. It looked as though the tree was giving birth to him. His head hung forward. He breathed weakly. Then he slowly raised his face. His skin was covered in scars. Lines, dots, waves, and spirals crossed his cheeks and forehead. His face was thin and almost inhuman. He opened his eyes. "Henri," he whispered. He knew my name. I woke covered in sweat. Rain hammered the tent. I tried to calm myself without waking Nadia. Then I heard a slow sound. Zip. At first, I thought someone was opening the entrance. The sound came again. Zip. Then I realized it was behind me. Someone was cutting through the back of the tent. I kept a pocket knife inside my sleeping bag every night. I reached for it quietly. My fingers closed around something. Before I could raise it, a heavy object struck the back of my head. Everything went black. When I woke, I was moving. Something covered my head. It felt like a rough sack. My arms and legs were tied. My mouth was gagged. Someone carried me through the jungle. I tried to struggle, but the ropes were too tight. After some time, I was dropped onto the ground. Pain shot through my head. Someone pulled me onto my knees. People spoke around me in a language I did not understand. I heard crying. I began to panic. The sack pressed against my face, and I thought I might suffocate. Then, someone removed it. Bright light blinded me. When my vision cleared, I saw the short man who had threatened Moses. His body was covered in gray paste. Other short men stood around him, also painted gray. Rain ran over their skin, making them look like melting skeletons. I heard crying beside me. All the members of the commune were on their knees. Moses, Jerome, Beth, Ty, Chantal, Angela, and Nydia. Their hands were tied behind them. Their mouths were gagged. Then the gray men stepped aside. We saw where they had brought us. We were kneeling in front of the fence. Everyone began making muffled sounds of fear. The leader shouted an order. The men pulled us to our feet and pressed machetes against the backs of our necks. Nydia was crying. Several men opened a loose section of the fence, like a gate. Beyond it was darkness. The leader gave another command. Beth, Chantal, Moses, Jerome, and Nydia were pushed toward the opening. Moses begged through his gag. The others cried and struggled. Then I realized Angela and I had not been moved. Ty was about to be pushed through, but the leader suddenly stopped the men. He studied Ty for a moment. Then he ordered them to bring him back beside us. The three of us stood together, helpless. We watched the others disappear through the fence one by one. Nydia was last. She looked back at me. Her eyes begged me to help. I could do nothing. The darkness swallowed her. After they crossed, we could not see or hear them. It was as though they had entered another world. The leader approached me with a knife. I thought he was going to kill me. I cried and begged through the gag. He raised the knife to my throat. Then he cut the cloth away, slicing my skin in the process. He moved behind me and cut the rope around my wrists. The other men freed Ty and Angela. I began begging the leader for answers. He raised the knife again. "Shut up!" He shouted. "Shut up!" I nodded. After a long silence, he spoke clearly. "You go back. Your friend's gone now. They dead. You no return here. Go." He shoved me away. The other men pushed Ty and Angela in the same direction. They continued shouting as we left. Asili. Asili. We moved away from the fence and the darkness beyond it. Later, we tried to understand why we had been spared. The only explanation we could think of was that Angela and I were white. If we disappeared, there might be greater pressure from foreign governments to search for us. Ty was mixed race. Maybe that had been enough for them to spare him, too. It was an ugly theory, but it was all we had. We returned to the commune and gathered our supplies. Angela wanted to head for the river, find a boat, and return to Kinshasa. Ty refused. He said he would not leave while his friends were still beyond the fence. Angela told him the only way to help them was to contact the authorities. To everyone's surprise, I agreed with Tay. I had come to protect Nydia. If I left her behind, the entire journey would have been for nothing. I said we had to cross the fence and search for the others. For the first time, Ty looked at me with respect. Angela called us both idiots. She was right. Staying was a death sentence. But I could not leave. Part of me wanted to rescue Nadia. Another part wanted something far more dangerous. I needed to know what was beyond that fence. Something there had been calling me since before I arrived in Africa. The thought of leaving without seeing it made me feel as though I might tear my own skin away. Angela became quiet. She could have left us. But she knew that without her, Ty and I would die. Finally, she sighed. "Fine," she said. "I'm going with you." We planned how to enter without attracting the short men. In the end, there was no clever plan. We found a distant section of the barrier. Angela used a machete to cut through the wood and vines. She created a loose section. Ty and I tied a rope around it and pulled until it broke away. The opening stood before us. Beyond it was darkness. It looked like the entrance to hell. Angela looked at us. "Remember," she said, "you asked for this. None of us truly wanted to enter." We knew there was a good chance we would not return. I had my reason for going. Ty had his. We held hands so we would not lose one another. Angela stepped through first. Ty followed. Then I crossed the fence. We pushed through leaves, branches, and thick plants. The light behind us faded. The darkness closed around us like someone shutting their eyes. I have to stop here. I thought I could tell the whole story, but I cannot. Not yet. What had already happened was nothing compared to what came next. What we found beyond the fence cannot be explained easily. Even if I told you, you would not believe me. But you would also wish I had never told you. Part of me still hopes none of it was real. For the sake of my soul, and because of the things I was forced to do inside that place, I need to believe it was only a nightmare, even if the nightmare never ends. In case I never finish this story, and in case I am not alive long enough to explain the rest, there is one final thing you should know. A year ago, I searched for the meaning of the word asili. It is a Swahili word. It means the beginning. Story 2. I had never seen Christmas carolers in my neighborhood before. To me, caroling was one of those old traditions that survived more in movies, television shows, and holiday stories than in real life. I knew people probably still did it somewhere, but I had never opened my front door to find a cheerful group singing on the sidewalk. I had never heard voices moving from house to house through the snow. I did not think much about it until the night of the last winter solstice. It was not Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. That detail has stayed with me. I do not believe it was an accident that they came on the longest night of the year. Winter celebrations are older than Christianity. They are older than many of the pagan traditions that later became part of Christmas. The names, beliefs, and customs have changed across different places and centuries, but the reason people gather in the middle of winter has always been easy to understand. Winter used to mean real danger. Cold weather could kill. Food could run out. Roads could disappear beneath snow, and families could become trapped for weeks or months. Some people would not live long enough to see spring. So people gathered together. When there was hunger, they shared a feast. When there was not enough, they exchanged gifts anyway. They sang against the silence and lit fires against the cold. They decorated bare homes and dead trees with anything bright enough to make the darkness feel less powerful. When the nights became longest, people made as much light as they could. I believe that ancient need to care for others, to stand together when the world seems cold and uncaring, is the only way to explain what happened outside my home that night. The singing began so quietly that I almost ignored it. At first, I thought it was music coming from a neighbor's television. Then I wondered if someone had left a radio playing in a parked car. The sound was distant and low, and the walls of our house softened it into a gentle vibration. But it kept growing louder. The voices came closer, little by little, moving down the street in a slow and steady rhythm. They were not singing any Christmas song I recognized. There were no cheerful bells, no familiar lyrics, and no warm melody. It sounded more like chanting. I was sitting in the living room when I finally stood and went to the window. It was not very late, but the sun had set hours earlier. Twilight was gone, and the sky was a smooth silver gray. Snow fell softly beneath the streetlights, each flake shining for a moment before vanishing into the darkness. Most of the houses on our street had holiday lights. Red and green bulbs wrapped around porch railings. Glowing plastic reindeer stood in front yards. A few windows displayed electric candles. That was enough light for me to see the group walking down the center of the road. There were at least 12 of them. They did not look like normal carolers. They were not wearing modern coats, scarves, or winter hats. They were not dressed like the Victorian singers shown on Christmas cards. They wore enormous robes in dark green and deep scarlet. The clothes were so wide and heavy that I could not tell what kind of bodies were underneath. Some of the figures were tall, while others were shorter, but all of them moved with the same slow pace. Their hoods were large and strangely shaped, hanging far over their faces. I could see no skin, no eyes, and no mouths. The chanting continued without pause. Martin, I called toward the hallway. "Babe, come here and look at this." I pulled out my phone and opened the camera. "Keep your voice down," my husband replied as he came into the room. "I just got Gigi back to sleep." He stopped when he heard the sound outside. "Is that singing?" he asked. "Kind of," I said. "There's a whole group walking down the street. I think they're wassailing or something." Wassailing? Old-fashioned caroling. I think. Martin stepped beside me and looked through the curtains. "They don't look like Christmas carolers," I continued. "They look more like medieval monks." He watched them for a few seconds. "The chanting sounds a little like a Latin church service," he said. "They could be from St. Aria's Cathedral. You know how that place is. They love old rituals." "That isn't Latin." "You speak Latin now?" "No, but listen to it. It sounds too rough, too deep. The sounds coming from the figures seem to come from throats that were shaped differently from ours. Some notes were so low that I felt them inside my chest. Others rose into thin, sharp tones that did not sound human at all. "Lovecraftian," I whispered. Martin glanced at me. "What?" "It sounds like something from a cosmic horror story." I held up my phone and tried to record them. The screen showed the street, the snow, the lights, and the houses. But where the robed figures should have been, the image broke apart into blocks of dark color. The audio meter did not move. I stopped the recording and tried again. The same thing happened. "This is strange," I said. "My phone can't record them." "It's probably some software problem," Martin replied. "They keep putting new artificial intelligence features into everything. Companies release things before they work properly. This is not a normal camera problem. Move fast and break things," he said with a shrug. "Maybe those people have the right idea. Give up technology and dress like monks." I read somewhere that medieval workers had more days off than we do. "Martin, I'm serious." The chanting became louder. My stomach tightened. The sound made me feel slightly dizzy, as though I had stood up too quickly. A thin pressure formed behind my eyes. "Something about this is wrong," I said. "They're just singing." "No, they're not just singing. Carolers do not walk down random streets without warning while chanting strange hymns at the sky. They're probably an unusual religious group. Then, they can be unusual somewhere else." I stepped away from the window. "Make sure the doors are locked." Martin sighed, but he checked the front door. "They're on a public street," he said. "They're not doing anything illegal. They're making me feel sick. If they stay too long, we can call someone. We should call the police now." Martin looked through the curtain again. "If the town lets those women from the yoga center perform rituals in parks and cemeteries, they probably have to let St. Arias do this too. Otherwise, someone will complain about religious discrimination. They are not from St. Arias." Before Martin could answer, a front door opened several houses down. An older man stepped outside. I recognized him as one of our neighbors, though I did not know his name. He lived across the street with his wife and spent most mornings clearing leaves or washing his car. He had the kind of voice that carried across several yards even when he was speaking normally. He marched toward the robed figures with angry, confident steps. I crouched slightly beneath the window, feeling foolish for hiding, but unable to stop myself. The man shouted at the group. He asked who they were and what they thought they were doing. He told them people were trying to sleep. He demanded that they leave the neighborhood. I am almost certain he also told them to get off his lawn, even though they were in the street. The robed figures did not react. They continued walking and chanting as though he did not exist. Their lack of response made him angrier. He stepped directly in front of one of them. The figure stopped. The others continued chanting around it. The neighbor moved close and reached toward the front of its hood. I wanted to shout at him not to do it. Before I could, he looked inside. His anger disappeared. Every muscle in his face went loose. His eyes widened and his mouth opened, but no sound came out. He slowly stepped backward. Both hands rose to cover his ears. He shook his head again and again, as though refusing to accept something he could see or hear. After 3 steps, his knees gave way. He fell onto the street, vomited onto the snow, and curled into a tight ball at the figure's feet. The chanting never stopped. None of the robed beings looked down at him. "Oh my God," I whispered. Martin stared through the window. "All right," he said. "You were right. Call emergency services." The neighbor's wife ran out of their house. She screamed her husband's name as she crossed the yard. She dropped beside him and pulled at his shoulder, trying to make him respond. He did not move. For one moment, she looked up toward the nearest robed figure. Whatever she saw made her immediately look away. She did not ask the singers for help. She did not accuse them or shout at them. Instead, she grabbed her husband beneath the arms and tried to drag him back toward the house. "I'm going to help her," Martin said. He handed me his phone. "No," I replied. "Do not go outside. He could be having a heart attack. We do not know what they did to him. They scared him. He's older, and he collapsed. Then why are they not helping him? Martin pulled on his coat. Because they're strange religious people, not doctors. What's happening? Gigi's voice came from behind us. Our daughter stood at the entrance to the living room. She was still wearing her pajamas, and her hair was messy from sleep. She held a small stuffed rabbit against her chest. Nothing, sweetie, I said. Some people outside are making too much noise. Go back to bed. She listened to the chanting. Is it Christmas singing? I think so, I lied. She walked toward the window. They sound pretty. I stepped in front of her. They do not have presents or candy, I said. There is nothing to see. I still want to look. Martin finished tying his shoes. They're wearing funny clothes, Gigi added. Gigi, listen to me, Martin said firmly. We don't know who those people are. I'm going outside to help Mr. and Mrs. Neighbor, but you have to stay inside with Mommy. Before Gigi could answer, a scream came from across the street. It was not the old man's wife. Someone else had gone outside. Martin opened the door and ran toward the sound. Gigi slipped past me. Gigi, I shouted. She ran after her father. I dropped the phone and chased them. Cold air struck my face as I stepped outside. The street had become chaos. Several more neighbors had come out of their homes. Some had tried to confront the robed singers and had collapsed just like the first man. They lay on lawns and sidewalks, shaking, vomiting, or staring at nothing. Their relatives tried to drag them away. Martin was helping another man carry a motionless woman toward her porch. Don't look at their faces. Someone screamed. Do not look inside the hoods. I saw Gigi standing only a few feet from one of the robed figures. I ran toward her. She looked up. I reached her and grabbed her around the waist, but I was too late. She had seen what was beneath the hood, and when I pulled her close, I looked too. There was no face. The hood surrounded a deep opening where a head should have been. It was not simply an empty hood. The creature had a skull, but the front of it was a dark, hollow space shaped like a doorway. Inside that space floated a small light. It looked like a pale blue flame or a glowing piece of mist. It moved slowly in the darkness, pulsing in time with the chanting. The skin around the opening was gray-blue, wet-looking, and rubbery. It was covered with dark spots and thin folds. At the bottom of the opening, I saw two narrow shapes moving beneath the robe. Tentacles, they slid down from inside the skull and vanished beneath the heavy cloth. The sight should have been impossible. But seeing the creature did more than show me its body. The moment I looked into the hollow face, something opened inside my mind. I suddenly understood the chanting. Not the words. I could not translate the language. But I understood its purpose. The robed beings were calling something. My eyes turned toward the sky. A huge shape was descending through the clouds. It was not solid in the way ordinary living things are solid. It looked like a mountain-sized mass of glowing liquid, trembling and changing shape as it moved. Thousands of short, useless limbs surrounded its uneven body. They waved weakly in the air, like the legs of a dying insect. The underside of the creature was covered with holes. There were more than I could count. Some were small, while others were wide enough to swallow a house. They opened and closed in uneven patterns, pulsing like mouths or wounds. Many of those holes contained the same glowing lights I had seen inside the singers' heads, but almost as many were empty. It still had room for more. The moment I understood that, I lost control of my body. My knees struck the snow. I pulled Gigi against my chest and wrapped both arms around her. She whimpered but did not try to escape. I tried to cover her face. I wanted to stop her from looking upward, but I could not stop myself from staring. The thing in the sky came closer. I had no way to judge its real size. It could have been just above the clouds or far beyond them. It looked enormous enough to cover the neighborhood, the town, or perhaps the whole horizon. The empty holes beneath it opened fully. Rows of teeth appeared around their edges. They were sharp, wet, and arranged in circles like stones around deep pools. Long tongues began to slide from the openings. They were covered with hooks and rough barbs. They stretched downward through the air, searching for the helpless people below. The chanting had not been a celebration. It had been bait. The robed creatures had called this thing to our world. I knew there was nothing I could do. I held my daughter more tightly and rocked back and forth. My mind had fallen into a primitive kind of fear. There was no plan, no hope, and no useful thought. I could only hold Gigi until the end. One of the tongues moved toward our street. It was wider than a bus. Its hooks moved independently, opening and closing as it descended. Then a clear voice shouted from among the robed singers. Now, the chanting stopped. Spectral tentacles burst from the backs of every robed figure. The glowing limbs struck the ground and launched the beings high into the air. They vanished before reaching the rooftops. A second later, they appeared around the monster in the sky. The creature's tongues twisted toward them. The robed beings moved with impossible speed. They vanished and reappeared in flashes of green, red, and gold. Their spectral limbs pulled them between the attacking tongues. Some carried long-bladed weapons. The weapons looked like swords made from dark metal and white fire. A singer drove one of the blades into a tongue. A beam of light shot through the flesh and traveled upward into the larger body. The monster shook. Another robed being struck a second tongue. Then another. Lines of light moved through the creature's body like lightning beneath clear skin. The tongues pulled back violently. The monster began to tremble. Its many mouths opened at once. The sound it made was not simply a roar. It was a wave of anger and pain that passed through my bones. Windows cracked. Car alarms started. Snow fell from rooftops. The being twisted in the sky. Its body expanded. For one terrible second, I thought it was falling. Then it exploded. The sky filled with shining blue flesh. A wave of liquid and glowing tissue spread in every direction. I thought the entire neighborhood would drown beneath it. But as the material fell, it lost its shape. The larger pieces broke into smaller ones. The smaller pieces turned into blue snow. The strange flakes landed on my coat, my hands, and Gigi's hair. They were cold for less than a second. Then they vanished. Silence returned. Only one of the robed beings appeared on the ground. It stood in the middle of the street and slowly turned its hollow head, studying the damage. Everyone seemed alive. People remained curled on lawns or lying in the snow, but I saw no serious wounds. The being's gaze passed over the houses, cars, and bodies. Finally, it stopped on me. You really should not have watched that, it said. Its voice sounded calm and almost kind. I could not answer. It was a great galactic ghoul, the being continued. In case you were wondering. I had not been wondering. I had been trying to remember how to breathe. Only a young one, it added. A baby, by their standards. The creature moved one long hand from beneath its robe. Its fingers were thin and clawed, but its gestures seemed strangely human. They drift between worlds until they sense a place with intelligent life. Then they enter that world and feed until nothing remains. By the time they are full, they become too large to leave. It looked up at the empty sky. Eventually, they die. When they die, they release spores. Those spores grow into more ghouls, and the cycle begins again. My daughter shook in my arms. The being lowered its head. "We brought this one here," it admitted. "I apologize for the trouble." Trouble? That word felt too small for what had happened. "You brought it here?" I managed to whisper. Opportunities to kill them while they are still young are rare. If we had allowed it to continue drifting, at least one inhabited world would probably have been destroyed. It paused. "I understand that this was unpleasant for you to witness, but please take some comfort in knowing that it was done for a good reason." I stared at it. The worst experience of my life had just occurred outside my home. My daughter had seen something that could destroy her mind. My husband and neighbors had been placed in danger. A creature capable of eating entire worlds had been pulled into the sky above us. And this being was responsible. I should have hated it. I should have screamed, attacked it, or demanded answers. Instead, beneath the fear, I felt something else. Curiosity. The robed creatures had not called the monster here to feed it our world. They had used our neighborhood as a battlefield because they saw a chance to stop it. They had risked their lives to kill something that might one day destroy a planet they had never visited. "Why?" I asked. The word barely left my mouth. The being leaned slightly closer. "Why would you do that?" I continued. "Why risk yourselves to save people you don't know?" The glowing light inside its hollow skull became warmer. "'Tis the season," it replied. He gave me a slow and respectful nod. In the distance, engines approached. Many engines. Police sirens joined the sound, followed by ambulances and heavy vehicles. The robe being looked toward the end of the street. "That will be the containment team," it said. It raised one long finger to the place where a human nose would have been. "If you will excuse me, I have no nose, and I must kringle." Before I could ask what that meant, the creature vanished in a cloud of golden sparks. The sparks swirled in the snow for a moment like something from a Christmas movie. Then they disappeared. The first vehicles arrived seconds later. There were police cars and ambulances, which I expected. But there were also black limousines, dark SUVs, unmarked armored trucks, and vehicles that looked like mobile laboratories. Men and women in protective suits jumped out before the wheels had fully stopped. Paramedics moved among the collapsed residents. Police officers blocked both ends of the street. Armed teams entered houses and searched yards. Researchers carried metal cases, strange sensors, and clear containers. They collected snow, pieces of clothing, broken glass, and anything else they believed had touched the blue material. People in dark uniforms stepped across lawns without asking permission. They searched every room. They took phones, security cameras, and doorbell systems. When an officer asked what I had seen, I hesitated. I expected disbelief. Instead, he listened without changing his expression. When I finished, he closed his notebook. "This is above our level now," he said. "You'll need to give that statement again to the Special Circumstances Division." I did not know such a division existed. Apparently, it did. After the paramedics checked us, several agents interviewed every resident. Their questions were careful and specific. They asked about the chanting, the robes, the floating lights, the creatures' mouths, and the weapons used to kill it. They clearly knew more than they were willing to explain. When the interviews ended, medical workers gave us pills and injections. They said the treatment would reduce shock and help prevent long-term trauma. The medicine worked better than anything should have. Within days, I could remember what happened without feeling the full terror. It was almost as though I were remembering a scene from a movie instead of something I had lived through. The effect was stronger on other people. Martin remembers only parts of the night. He believes there was some kind of electrical accident and a mass panic. Most of our neighbors think they had a shared nightmare caused by contaminated water or gas. Gigi remembers even less. She says she dreamed about Christmas monks fighting a giant sky monster. I am grateful for that. I do not want my daughter to carry the real memory. But I do not want to forget it myself. I do not want to forget that when a horror beyond human understanding came down from the sky, someone fought it. They were not humans. They were not from our church, our neighborhood, or perhaps even our universe. But they were people. They were intelligent beings who looked at a cold and uncaring cosmos and decided that they did not have to be cold and uncaring too. They could have ignored the great galactic ghoul. They could have allowed it to find another world and destroy everyone living there. Instead, they took the risk upon themselves. They gathered in the darkness. They sang against the silence. They dressed in bright colors. And on the longest night of the year, they brought their own strange kind of light. That is what I remember whenever people say that the holiday season has lost its meaning. The decorations, the gifts, the songs, and the traditions are only symbols. The real meaning has always been the choice to care when caring is difficult. It is sharing what you have when there is not enough. It is creating warmth in the cold. It is making light in the darkness. It is standing against something terrible, not because it threatens you personally, but because someone, somewhere, needs to be protected from it. Sometimes the people doing that may look like family. Sometimes they may look like strangers. And sometimes they may be hollow-faced, tentacled beings in medieval robes who kill a baby world eater above your neighborhood and vanish in golden Christmas sparkles. The universe may be dark, violent, and uncaring. That does not mean we have to be. In the end, I suppose that is what the holiday season is really about. Story 3. How do I know you're not a serial killer? Amanda asked. She stared at me for one serious second before bursting into giggles. I knew she was joking. She had made the same kind of comments while we were texting. Her sense of humor was old-fashioned and painfully simple. She loved bad puns, boring one-liners, and jokes that stopped being funny before they even reached the end. It was one of the many things about her that already annoyed me. Still, I kept my expression calm. I had spent years learning how to hide what I really thought about people. Most people believed a smile meant kindness. They had no idea how easy it was to copy one. Well, I said, lifting my glass, I doubt a serial killer would treat his victim to such an expensive dinner. Amanda laughed again. I looked down at the half-empty plate in front of her. Are you sure you don't want the salad? I asked. No, I'm fine. The steak was enough. She pushed the plate away. Besides, lettuce leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I smiled, but irritation burned inside me. She knew how expensive the food was at Noir and Blanc. Everyone in the city knew. The restaurant was famous for its private dining rooms, black marble floors, white linen tables, and menu prices that made ordinary people uncomfortable. The Caesar salad alone cost $500. Her steak had cost $700. She had also ordered it extra rare. The chef had been forced to prepare it specially because the restaurant usually refused to serve meat that raw. When the waiter warned her that the center would be almost cold, Amanda had only smiled and said that was exactly how she liked it. No normal person ate steak like that. The outside had barely touched the grill, and the middle was still red. When she cut into it, thin streams of blood-colored juice spread across the white plate. She had eaten almost every bite. Now she sat across from me and complained about lettuce. I suspected she was doing it on purpose. Maybe she wanted to test how much I was willing to spend. Perhaps she believed that because I drove a BMW and wore an expensive watch, I would happily waste money to impress her. Women like Amanda always believed beauty gave them power. The steak was rather small, I said, pretending to be concerned. Are you certain it was enough? Yes, it was. She gave me a slow smile. Even if it wasn't, maybe I can snack on something else at your place. Under the table, she slid her foot against my ankle and then slowly rubbed her leg along mine. I nearly pulled away. So that was her plan. She was already suggesting that we go back to my place. We had only met in person a few hours earlier, and she was acting as though the evening had already been decided. I wondered how often she did this. She probably searched dating apps for wealthy men, let them buy her expensive meals, and then made them believe they had earned her attention. Desperate, predictable, cheap. At least she was pleasant to look at. Amanda had pale, smooth skin that appeared almost white beneath the restaurant's soft lighting. Her eyes were an unusual shade of green, deep and bright like polished emeralds. Long waves of brown hair fell down her back and nearly reached her waist. She wore a red dress with an open back and a neckline designed to attract attention. Every man who walked past our table looked at her, and every time they did, she seemed to sit a little straighter. She enjoyed being watched. Women like her always did. Oh, trust me, Amanda, I said, allowing a small smile to appear. The night isn't over yet. I was not lying. The night was far from over. The waiter returned with the bill. I handed him my card without checking the total. I already knew what it would cost, and the money did not matter. Money had never mattered to me. It was useful because it opened doors. It made people trust you. A man wearing a cheap suit and driving an old car would be questioned if he invited a woman somewhere private. A man with a luxury vehicle and a reservation at the most expensive restaurant in the city was called romantic. Amanda watched me sign the receipt. You really know how to treat a woman, she said. I try. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Her fingers were colder than I expected. For a brief moment, something about that touch made me uncomfortable. Her skin did not feel normal. It was smooth and soft, but cold enough to remind me of meat taken from a refrigerator. Then she smiled, and I ignored the feeling. We left the restaurant shortly after 11. A full moon hung above the city, bright enough to make the streets look pale. Cold wind moved between the buildings as we walked toward the parking garage. Amanda held my arm and leaned against me. She kept talking about the dinner, the restaurant, and the people she had seen inside. She mentioned a famous actor sitting near the back and wondered aloud whether he had noticed her. I pretended to listen. My mind was already focused on the next part of the evening. The BMW waited on the lower level of the garage, polished and spotless. Amanda gave a soft whistle. when she saw it. "This is yours?" I unlocked the doors. "Of course. Very nice." She climbed into the passenger seat and immediately lowered the mirror to check her makeup. I watched her for a few seconds before starting the engine. She adjusted her hair, wiped the corner of her mouth, and carefully applied another layer of red lipstick. Then she turned to me. "Do I look all right?" "You look perfect." That was true. Perfect for what I had planned. We left the garage and entered the highway. At that hour, traffic had begun to thin. Most cars stayed close to the city while I continued toward the coast. Amanda did not notice the change in direction. She spent nearly the entire drive looking at her phone. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen as she typed message after message. She was probably telling her friends about me. Perhaps she had sent them a picture of the restaurant or the car. Maybe she was bragging that she had found another rich man willing to entertain her. Normally, that would have concerned me. Phones created evidence. Messages created timelines. Friends remembered details. But I had prepared for that. I had used a false name on the dating application. The photographs were mine, but the personal information was not. The car had been registered through a company that could not easily be connected to me. The restaurant reservation had been made using another identity. This was not my first time. I knew how to disappear from someone's final evening. The city lights faded behind us. Buildings became fewer, and the highway narrowed as it passed between dark hills. Amanda continued texting. That helped me. She did not see me take the exit toward the abandoned coastal road. The road had once been used by tourists, but part of it had collapsed during a storm years earlier. The local government had placed warning signs near the entrance, though people still used the first few miles to reach hiking trails and hidden beaches. At night, almost no one went there. The trees grew close to the pavement. The moon flashed between their branches as we drove. Eventually, Amanda looked up from her phone. "Where are we going?" I kept my eyes on the road. "There's a place near the cliff that I know. The moon looks incredible from there." "A cliff?" "It's safe. There's a wide viewing area. You can see the ocean for miles." Her suspicion disappeared. "Aw," she said, leaning toward me. "That's actually very romantic. You're so thoughtful." Before I could react, she kissed my cheek. Her lips pressed against my skin for only a second, but I felt the sticky mark left behind. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. Her lipstick was on my face. It was another piece of evidence I would need to remove later. I would have to clean my skin, inspect my collar, and make sure she had not left a hair anywhere in the car. She had no idea how much trouble she was causing. Amanda returned to her phone, smiling to herself. I controlled my breathing and continued driving. The road curved sharply upward. The forest slowly opened, revealing the dark ocean beyond. Moonlight shone across the water like a silver path. At the top of the hill was a flat clearing near the edge of the cliff. I had been there many times. It was one of my favorite places. The cliff dropped nearly 200 feet into the ocean. Strong currents moved below, carrying anything that fell into the water far from the shore. The nearest house was several miles away, and phone service was weak. People rarely visited at night. It was private, quiet, and easy to clean. I parked the car facing the ocean. Amanda put her phone into her purse and looked through the windshield. Wow, the full moon hung above the water. Waves broke against the rocks far below, filling the night with a deep, endless roar. "I told you," I said. "It's beautiful." She reached for the door handle. "Should we get out?" Not yet. She turned toward me. There was still a smile on her face, but it had weakened. I watched her carefully. You know, I said, pretty women like you are all the same. Amanda gave a nervous laugh. What does that mean? You use your appearance, you use charm and attention to get whatever you want from men. Her smile disappeared completely. I don't think I like where this conversation is going. You find someone successful and make him believe you care about him. Then you take his money, his time, and whatever else he is foolish enough to give you. She stared at me. You're being weird. I am simply being honest. You don't even know me. I know enough. Amanda glanced toward her door again. I locked the car. The sound of the locks clicking seemed much louder than usual. Her eyes moved from the door to me. What are you doing? I paid for your dinner. I listened to your terrible jokes. I watched you flirt with a waiter and look at every wealthy man in that restaurant. I wasn't flirting with anyone. You were. She reached toward the lock. I grabbed her wrist. Amanda tried to pull away, but I held on tightly. You're hurting me. You disgust me, I said. Fear finally appeared in her eyes. It was a look I knew well. People showed their true selves when they were afraid. Their manners disappeared. Their confidence vanished. In the final moments, everyone became honest. I released her wrist and moved before she could react. My hand closed around her throat. Amanda gasped. I forced her back against the passenger seat and tightened my fingers around her neck. Her eyes widened. Her hands grabbed my arm as she tried to pull me away, but she was not strong enough. You came with me because you thought I was rich, I said. You planned to use me and then move on to the next man. She tried to speak, but only a weak, choking sound came out. You women destroy lives. You trap successful men, take their money, and ruin everything they have built. Her nails dug into my skin. Pain moved through my arm, but I did not loosen my grip. You are the filth in this world, I whispered. Someone needs to clean it. Amanda kicked at the dashboard. Her face began to change color. I leaned closer. I suppose your question at dinner was reasonable after all. Keeping one hand around her throat, I reached toward the glove compartment. I opened it and removed the knife. The blade reflected the moonlight. I could have used something cleaner. A rope would have left less blood. Drugs would have been easier. There were many ways to kill someone without creating a mess. But I preferred a knife. There was something honest about it. The closeness, the struggle, the warmth of the blood. Nothing else produced the same feeling. Amanda saw the blade and began fighting harder. I pressed my weight against her and pulled the knife across her throat. Blood appeared instantly. It sprayed across the seat, the window, and my sleeve. Her body jerked violently. I watched the shock in her eyes as she tried to understand what had happened. Then I drove the blade into her chest. Once, twice, again, she tried to push me away, but her movements were already becoming weaker. I stabbed her in the stomach and ribs, continuing until my arm grew tired. Eventually, her hands fell away from me. Her head rolled to one side. Blood ran down her red dress and gathered on the floor beneath her feet. The car became silent, except for the sound of the ocean and my heavy breathing. I sat still for several seconds. The familiar calm slowly returned. It always came afterward. Before a murder, I felt anger and disgust. During it, I felt powerful. When it ended, everything inside me became peaceful. I wiped the knife against Amanda's dress and looked at her face. She no longer looked proud or beautiful. She looked empty. I unlocked my door and stepped outside. The cold air touched my skin. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. The smell of salt came from the ocean, mixing with the iron smell of blood on my clothes. Above me, the moon seemed larger than it had in the city. This truly was the perfect place. Murder beneath moonlight felt almost poetic. The dark water below waited patiently, and the cliff offered a simple solution to every problem. I had brought others there. None had ever been found. I walked toward the back of the BMW. Inside the trunk was a large plastic sheet, a body bag, rope, cleaning chemicals, and extra clothes. I had everything arranged carefully. The plan was simple. I would place Amanda inside the bag, weigh it down, and throw her from the cliff. Then I would clean the car as well as possible and finish the rest at a private garage. By morning, there would be no sign she had ever been with me. I reached for the trunk. Something struck the back of my head. My face slammed against the car. Pain exploded through my nose and teeth. For a moment, the world became white. I stumbled and grabbed the trunk to keep myself from falling. Warm blood ran from my nose. Someone stood behind me. That was impossible. No one had followed us. I had checked the road. The clearing had been empty. I spun around. Amanda stood there. At first, my mind refused to understand what I was seeing. She was still wearing the red dress. Blood covered her chest, neck, and arms. Her hair was wet with it. But she was standing. Her posture was straight. Her eyes were open. I stared toward the passenger side of the car. The door was open. How? I whispered. Amanda smiled. Before I could move, her hand closed around my throat. She lifted me away from the car with surprising strength. My feet nearly left the ground. I grabbed her wrist and tried to pull free, but her arm felt like iron. She brought her face close to mine. The deep cut across her throat was still visible. As I watched, the wound began to close. The edges of the torn skin pulled together slowly. Blood stopped flowing. Within seconds, only a thin red line remained. Then that disappeared too. I looked down at her chest. The holes made by my knife were shrinking. Torn skin moved over them, sealing the wounds. Her body repaired itself before my eyes, as though the stabbing had never happened. Only the blood remained. I tried to speak, but Amanda tightened her fingers. Fear entered me for the first time in years. Real fear. Not the small nervousness of being discovered, not the excitement of taking a risk. This was something different. I was looking at something impossible. Amanda tilted her head. You know, she said calmly, I actually thought you were a nice guy. Her voice was perfectly clear. There was no damage to her throat. I was considering not hunting tonight. She smiled wider. But you left me no choice. Her teeth changed as I watched. 2 long fangs extended from her upper jaw. Her pale skin seemed to glow beneath the moonlight. The soft green color vanished from her eyes, replaced by a deep burning red. I stopped struggling. Every detail from dinner suddenly returned to me. Her cold hand, her almost white skin, the extra rare steak, the way she had eaten the bloody center and ignored everything else. The comment about being hungry later. She had not been joking. Amanda pulled me closer. Besides, she whispered, I lied. Her lips moved near my ear. The steak really wasn't enough. I tried to scream. She opened her mouth and bit into my shoulder. Pain tore through me. Her teeth sank deep into the flesh near my neck, and I felt her jaw close with impossible force. She pulled backward. A large piece of skin and muscle tore free. My scream echoed across the cliff. Blood poured down my chest. I pushed against her, but she barely moved. She threw me onto the ground as easily as if I weighed nothing. I landed hard on my back. The knife was still inside the car. The body bag, rope, and cleaning supplies remained in the trunk. All my careful planning meant nothing. Amanda stood over me, chewing slowly. Blood covered her lips and chin. She swallowed and smiled. I tried to crawl away. The edge of the cliff was behind me. The car was to my left. The empty road stretched into the darkness, but I knew I would never reach it. Amanda walked after me without hurry. "You judged me so quickly," she said. "You thought I was foolish because I laughed. You thought I was weak because I flirted with you." I pressed one hand against the wound in my shoulder. Blood flowed between my fingers. "You thought you were the hunter." She crouched beside me. "But you never asked yourself why a woman would agree to follow a strange man into the middle of nowhere." I stared into her red eyes. She had known. Perhaps she had recognized what I was from the beginning. Maybe her joke at the restaurant had not really been a joke. "How many?" she asked. I could barely speak. "What? How many women have you brought here?" I said nothing. Amanda looked toward the cliff. "Enough that this place feels familiar to you." She reached down and grabbed my collar. "I can smell them." I tried to strike her, but she caught my hand before it reached her face. Her fingers closed around my wrist. Bones cracked. I screamed again. Amanda watched me with the same calm expression I had worn while choking her. For the first time, I understood what my victims must have felt. The disbelief, the helplessness, the terrible knowledge that no one was coming to help. I had believed fear made people honest. Now fear was showing me the truth about myself. I was not powerful. I had never been powerful. I had only chosen victims who trusted me and could not fight back. Amanda leaned closer. "You called them filth," she said. "You told yourself you were cleaning the world." Her smile returned. "I don't need excuses for what I am." She pulled me to my feet and dragged me toward the car. I tried to resist, but my legs were weak. She opened the trunk. Inside were all the tools I had prepared for her. Amanda studied them for a moment and laughed softly. A body bag. How thoughtful. She threw me inside. My injured shoulder struck the metal floor, sending another wave of pain through me. Amanda stood above me, framed by the full moon. "You were right about one thing," she said. I struggled to rise. "The night is far from over." She slammed the trunk shut. Darkness surrounded me. I heard her footsteps move around the car. A moment later, the driver's door opened. The engine started. I struck the inside of the trunk with my good hand. No one answered. The BMW began to move. As it turned away from the cliff, I realized she was not going to kill me there. That would have been too easy. She was taking me somewhere else, somewhere private, somewhere she had used before. I had spent years believing I was a hunter, hiding among ordinary people. That night, under the full moon, I finally met something that had been hunting far longer than I had. And unlike me, Amanda did not need a knife. Story 4. The captain avoided me during most of the journey. I saw him only once before our third night on the river. We were still in port when I noticed him entering the pilot room. He was a short, heavy man with a thick beard, a narrow face, and a sharp nose that reminded me of a small bird's beak. I called out to him and introduced myself, hoping to make a good first impression. He did not even turn around. He entered the pilot room and closed the door behind him. One of the crewmen later told me that the captain preferred to keep to himself. I assumed that would eventually change. The company had paid for my passage, and I had been invited to write about the trip. Surely the captain would understand that speaking to me was part of the arrangement. By our third night on the Mississippi, however, I had not seen him again. I began to imagine that the pilot room was not only where he controlled the steamer, but also where he slept, ate, and lived. Perhaps he had built a nest in there and had no reason to leave it. The Big Easy River Company had hired me to write an article about its new 4-day journey up the Mississippi. The voyage was only a test run, which meant I was the only passenger on board. The company wanted to know if the trip could attract enough customers to become a regular service. I was supposed to describe the scenery, the comfort, the history, and the romance of traveling by old-fashioned steamer. The rooms were acceptable, although not impressive. The previous month, I had traveled aboard a modern luxury ocean liner. That ship had wide rooms, expensive furniture, polished metal, fresh flowers, and staff members who seemed trained to predict what a passenger needed before the passenger asked. The Big Easy steamer gave me a small room, a clean blanket, and 1 mint on my pillow. Still, I was not there for comfort. The company was paying me well. They had also provided an extra bonus when I arrived, which made it clear that they expected the article to be positive. That did not bother me. I had written plenty of positive articles about places that did not deserve them. Most travel writing was not about truth. It was about giving readers a reason to spend money. The Big Easy River Company had once been one of the best-known companies on the river, but times had changed. Other businesses offered faster and cheaper trips. Ocean liners now sailed into New Orleans and promised passengers visits to distant islands and foreign ports. Compared to that, Missouri and Kansas did not sound especially exciting. The company needed something to make people interested again. I believed I could provide it. The trip itself had been smooth. The Mississippi was calm, and the old steamer moved steadily through the dark water. Sleeping was more difficult. The paddle wheel struck the river with a constant, heavy rhythm. The steam engine shook the ship and produced endless metal noises. Pipes knocked. Boards creaked. The whole vessel seemed to groan as though it were alive and unhappy about carrying us. My cabin was far from the paddle wheel, but on our third night, I still could not sleep. I lay in bed listening to the engine and thinking about the captain. A man who had spent his life on the Mississippi had to possess interesting stories. There had to be storms, accidents, missing boats, strange passengers, and old river legends. The company was struggling, yet the captain refused to speak to the person who had been hired to promote it. That made no sense. The rest of the crew behaved in the same way. They answered simple questions about meals or the schedule, but whenever I tried to begin a real conversation, they found an excuse to leave. I decided to walk around the ship and see if anyone was awake. Late-night conversations often produced the best material. People lowered their guard when they were tired, lonely, or drinking. They said things they would never say during the day. Years earlier, I had written about a camping ground in the Adirondacks. One evening, a park ranger told me about strange things he claimed to have seen in the forest. He spoke of ghosts, creatures, unexplained lights, and hikers who vanished. I included some of the darker stories in my article. My editors nearly removed them, saying the piece had become too frightening for a travel section. I convinced them to publish it without changes. The article became one of our most successful stories. Within a few months, reservations at the camping ground were booked for nearly 2 years. That experience taught me something important. Some tourists did not want comfort. They wanted fear. I called those people ghoul chasers. They traveled to haunted hotels, abandoned hospitals, cursed forests, crime scenes, and places connected to disturbing legends. They wanted a story they could tell when they returned home. They wanted to say they had heard footsteps in an empty hallway or seen a shadow moving between trees. Most of those experiences were fake, exaggerated, or imagined. It did not matter. Fear sold tickets. Whenever possible, I placed a small piece of darkness into my travel writing. Sometimes it was a local ghost story. Sometimes it was an old crime. Once, it was a real human skeleton discovered beneath a cabin. Not every business owner liked being connected to horror, but complaints usually ended when the extra visitors began spending money. The Mississippi had to be filled with legends. Pirates had traveled the river. Settlers had disappeared along its banks. Boats had sunk. Battles had been fought. Entire towns had been destroyed by floods. There had to be something useful for my article. The crew, however, refused to talk. I suspected the captain had ordered them to remain silent. If so, I would have to get the story from him. I left my cabin and walked along the quiet deck. The night was warm, but a light wind moved across the water. The river looked completely black under the moonless sky. The only sounds were the paddle wheel, the engine, and water brushing against the side of the ship. When I reached the front of the steamer, I suddenly stopped. The captain was standing by the railing. He held a pipe between his lips and stared into the darkness ahead. Small drops of river water covered his face and round stomach. He did not seem to notice them. I could hardly believe my luck. "Is there something hidden out there?" I asked with a friendly laugh. "Aye," he replied. His eyes remained fixed on the river. I laughed again. "Should I be worried?" He did not answer immediately. He drew smoke from his pipe and slowly released it. The gray cloud mixed with the night air. "You're the writer," he said. "I am." I extended my hand. "I've been hoping to speak with you. Your crew has said very good things about you." The captain looked at my hand, but did not take it. I lowered it awkwardly. "They're a good crew," he said. Flattery was not going to work. I tried another approach. "Have you worked for the Big Easy River Company for long?" "No, came aboard about a month ago. That was around the time the new owners took control, wasn't it?" "Aye. Where did you work before?" "I've piloted many boats along this river." "Do you enjoy it?" He shrugged. "I keep rolling along." It was a strange answer, but at least he was talking. "What made you take this job?" He was silent for a moment. "I needed work after my last position ended badly." That immediately caught my attention. "What happened?" "I worked for a private owner. I don't care to speak about it." I took out a cigarette and offered him one. He refused, but he opened a pouch and added fresh tobacco to his pipe. That told me he was not planning to leave yet. I offered him a match. He leaned toward the flame. "Was it a shipping job?" I asked. "Or some kind of private cruise?" "A little of both," he said. The owner brought his family, his wife and a little girl. The captain looked away. I warned him to leave them at home. The wild parts of the river were no place for a woman and child. He refused. When the person paying insists, people like us usually have to agree, I said. Some men have no sense. I've met plenty of them. The captain rested both arms on the railing. "Were there many small shipping companies on the river?" I asked. "Not as many as there used to be. Big fish swallow little fish. So this man owned a small company?" He wasn't carrying normal cargo. He was involved in something else. Smuggling? The captain gave a short, bitter laugh. Worse, he was an adventurer. A rich fool who believed money could purchase anything. Now I knew there was a real story. A wealthy man had hired the captain to take him and his family somewhere dangerous. Something had gone wrong. Perhaps the family had died. I needed to keep the captain talking. I read about river pirates before the trip, I said. Some supposedly buried treasure along the Mississippi. Was your employer searching for something like that? Something like that. Whose treasure? Blackbeard's? The captain looked up at the dark sky. It wasn't treasure. Not exactly. He turned as if preparing to leave. I reached out and grabbed his arm. He stopped and gave me a cold look. Forgive me, I said, releasing him. I understand you don't want to discuss it, but it sounds as though the memory is still troubling you. Maybe telling someone would help. His expression did not change. Anything you tell me can remain private, I added. Off the record. You have my word. He studied me. Would you make a blood oath? A blood oath? The captain pulled a small knife from his pocket. He showed me his palm. Several old scars crossed it, suggesting that he had performed this strange ritual many times before. This knowledge must remain secret, he said. Too many men and women have died because they learned it. I looked at the knife. The blade was old and stained. I wondered when it had last been cleaned. For a moment, I considered ending the conversation. Then, another thought entered my mind. Stories from old river captains might become a new series. There could be money in it. Fame, perhaps. An old scar across my hand seemed like a small price for an exclusive. All right, I said. I held out my palm. The captain moved quickly. The blade cut across my skin before I had time to prepare. I pulled my hand back as blood appeared. Without cleaning the knife, he cut his own palm. Shake on it. I hesitated, then took his hand. Our blood mixed. A cold shiver moved through my body. The things a writer does for a story. Now, I said, wiping my palm against a handkerchief, what was the man searching for? A hidden place down one of the river's smaller branches. Surely there aren't unexplored areas left along the Mississippi. There are unexplored places all around us, the captain replied. You simply have to know where to look. What was there? An ancient temple mound. Was something buried inside? You still don't understand. The mound itself was the treasure. How can a pile of earth be valuable? It is sacred. Built by native people? Older, I laughed. The captain did not. Older than the first tribes, I asked. Older than man. My smile disappeared. Men did not build that place, he continued. And men are not welcome there. I warned Mr. Chambers, but he would not listen. The name was familiar. Jonas Chambers had been a wealthy furniture manufacturer. Earlier that year, he, his wife, and his young daughter had disappeared. Newspapers reported that they had been traveling by train. They never arrived at their destination. No bodies were found. The disappearance led to an ugly court battle between Chambers' relatives over his company and fortune. The business eventually collapsed. Jonas Chambers? I asked. The captain nodded. He spent years searching for that temple. I refused to take him there 7 times. On the 8th request, the money was too good. You were with him when he disappeared? Aye. How did you survive? The captain lowered his eyes. I remained on the boat. What happened? He stared across the water. I watched them walk into the forest. I begged Chambers to leave his wife and daughter aboard, but rich men believe the world belongs to them. He paused. About 10 minutes after they entered the woods, everything became silent. The wind stopped. Everything stopped. Birds, insects, animals, the forest went quiet as if something had ordered it to be still. A cold feeling began moving through me. Then a wind came from the east, he continued. It was stronger than any storm wind I had felt. Ancient trees snapped like dry sticks. The boat nearly rolled onto its side, but I kept control. His voice weakened. Tears appeared in the corners of his eyes. I placed a hand on his arm, pretending to offer comfort. In truth, I wanted him to continue. The wind ended as suddenly as it began, he said. The forest remained quiet. Then I heard Chambers shouting with excitement. He had found the mound. His wife was laughing. The little girl was cheering. The captain swallowed. For a moment I smiled, too. I hoped they would look at it and return. But Chambers began climbing. Why was that dangerous? That place is not meant for us. What happened? A sound rose from beneath the ground. He looked at me. It was not an explosion or thunder. It was a voice, but no living throat could produce it. It came from deep inside the earth. He touched his chest. The sound shook my bones. I covered my ears, but it made no difference. The old ones can reach you however they choose. The words old ones immediately caught my attention. During my years writing about strange places, I had heard many stories that turned out to be lies. A town in Louisiana claimed to possess the remains of a two-headed child. The display was actually two preserved pig fetuses placed inside one jar. Another man predicted that the world would end on a certain date. When the day passed normally, he murdered his family and then killed himself. There had also been a man on Avery Island who claimed to speak with Mother Nature. I discovered he was a starving, mentally disabled person being displayed by his family as part of a roadside attraction. Most supernatural stories had an ordinary and often uglier truth behind them. Stories about the old ones were different. I had heard the name in several states from people who had no connection to one another. The details were often strangely similar. They spoke of beings that existed before human history. Creatures hidden beneath forests, mountains, rivers, and deserts. Some were worshipped as gods. Others were feared as destroyers. People who claimed to encounter them were never normal afterward. Most liars had a certain energy in their eyes. A trained journalist could see when someone was enjoying their own invention. People who spoke about the old ones had no such energy. Something inside them seemed to have been removed. Whether the stories were true or not, they were valuable. My ghoul chasers loved them. The old ones? I asked, pretending I had never heard the name. Before man climbed down from the trees, powerful beings ruled this land, the captain said. They came from places we cannot imagine. Some created order. Others spread madness. They protected certain people and destroyed others. You believe one of them lived near the Temple Mound? I know what I saw. Have you encountered them before? When you spend enough years on the water, strange things become common. The captain turned toward me. But when you encounter one of them, you never forget. What happened after the sound? I shouted for the Chambers family. I yelled until my throat hurt, but they did not answer. Perhaps they could no longer hear me. Human voices are very small compared to those beings. He took a deep breath. Then the sky above the trees filled with lights. What kind of lights? Thousands of them. green and yellow. Each one was no larger than a button. They moved over the mound like stars. Fireflies? No, his answer was sharp. No natural creature gathers in such numbers at a single command. That was the work of a god. A god? What else would you call a being that can command the earth, sky, and living creatures? The captain's face had become pale. What happened next? I asked. He looked down at his pipe. Have you ever heard the sound of a human body being torn apart? My stomach tightened. I slowly shook my head. The tearing came first, then the screams. His voice broke. The wife screamed. The child screamed. Chambers screamed last. For once, I had no clever response. When the lights disappeared, the forest returned to normal. He continued. The birds sang again. The insects began moving. It was as if nothing had happened. Did you leave? I should have. He refilled his pipe with shaking fingers. Something made me go ashore. I told myself I needed to search for survivors. I also wondered whether the sounds had been placed inside my mind. You wanted proof. I thought I could trust my own eyes. He accepted another match from me. The moment I stepped onto the shore, I felt as though I had entered another world. My body was shaking, but something pulled me into the trees. What? Curiosity. Or something pretending to be curiosity. He stared at the glowing tobacco. The forest became silent again. Why didn't you run? I heard the little girl crying. He closed his eyes. It was a sad sound. Helpless. I followed it. Did you find her? No. As I moved closer, the crying stopped. The captain looked directly at me. Then laughter began. The child was laughing. It was using her voice. A chill moved along my spine. I believe it could have killed me, he said. Instead, it warned me. I turned around and ran. Why would it spare you? I ask myself that every day. His face carried real pain. Why did I live while a woman and child died? Survivors often feel guilty, I said. It is a normal response. Sometimes survival is nothing more than chance. I am an engine, he whispered. I keep rolling on. Even engines need rest. He ignored me. They did not spare me out of kindness, he said. They cursed me with the knowledge that they exist. Then he looked at the cut on my hand. And now I have cursed you. I laughed nervously. How have you cursed me? You know they are there. Now you will want to see them. I don't know where the place is. The captain raised his pipe and pointed toward the shore. That is where we landed with Chambers. I stared into the darkness. You are certain? Hey, what are the chances that we would happen to pass the exact place while having this conversation? That is how they work. His voice became urgent. They bring people together. They place thoughts in their minds. They move us like pieces on a board. I looked toward the bank. I could see only darkness. I wanted to tell the captain he was right. I wanted to say I had no interest in going anywhere near the mound. Then I felt something inside my head, a small flutter near the base of my skull. The danger was obvious, but if I witnessed something connected to the old ones, this could become the greatest article of my career. The story might be published across the country. I could become famous. The payment would be enormous. They're speaking to you, the captain said. I turned toward him. What? The whispers. You hear them. I hear my own thoughts. Are you certain they are yours? Yes, the word came quickly, but doubt followed it. Were those thoughts truly mine? Had the idea of going ashore come from me? Had the decision to take this voyage been my own? Of course it had. Only I controlled my choices. Another possibility entered my mind. Perhaps the captain was deceiving me. I had no proof that he had worked for Jonas Chambers. His name had never appeared in the newspaper reports. Why had he avoided me throughout the entire trip, only to tell me everything in the middle of the night? Maybe he hated journalists and had created an elaborate joke. The more I considered it, the more reasonable it seemed. Yes, he was probably trying to frighten me. "If you wish," he said, "I can take you there." The flutter returned. "I would like that," I heard myself say. The words surprised me. I had intended to refuse. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes, I need to see it." My mouth seemed to operate independently from my mind. The captain nodded and walked toward the pilot room. I remained at the railing. Inside my head, I screamed at myself to follow him. I needed to stop him before he turned the steamer. My legs would not move. Something had entered my thoughts and taken control of my body. I could observe what happened. I could object inside my own mind. I simply could not change anything. The river had caught us. The steamer turned. A hidden branch of the river appeared ahead. It was narrow, but the captain guided the large vessel into it without difficulty. The ship moved slowly between trees and dark banks until the bottom touched the shallow ground. The engine quieted. The forest around us was incredibly loud. Birds called from the trees. Insects buzzed. Frogs croaked near the water. Branches moved as animals passed through them. The noise was so powerful that my own thoughts became difficult to hear. The foreign voice inside my mind, however, remained clear. The captain returned to the deck. "The water is shallow," he said. "Use the ladder. I will wait here." "That sounds wonderful," I replied cheerfully. I no longer knew whether it was truly me speaking. Before I could form another thought, I had climbed over the railing and started down the ladder. My feet entered the freezing water. A few steps later, I reached the shore. A narrow path led from the river into the forest. Although the area appeared wild and untouched, the path was clearly worn. Many feet had traveled that way before me. I knew it led to the mound. The small part of my mind that remained free begged me to turn around. My body continued forward. The holiest of pilgrimages. The captain shouted from the ship, "You have returned home, stranger. Rejoice before your gods. Praise be." I shouted back. Then I entered the trees. The path was wet and muddy. My shoes slipped with every step. The sounds of the forest became even louder. Nothing ran from me. The animals either did not know enough to fear humans, or they knew something much worse lived nearby. I prayed it was the first explanation. I believed it was the second. My foot suddenly landed on stone. The instant my shoe touched the ancient pathway, every sound stopped. Birds fell silent. Insects vanished. Even the leaves stopped moving. The captain's story returned to me. The wind would come next. A violent blast struck from the east. It lifted me off the ground and threw me through the air. I slammed against an ancient oak tree. Pain exploded through my back. A thick branch broke above me and fell toward the ground. Although stunned, I rolled aside just before it crashed where I had been lying. The impact shook the earth. As I moved, my head struck a stone. Bright colors filled my vision. Warm blood began running down my forehead. My entire body hurt. But the blow to my head had broken the control. My mind was suddenly mine again. One clear thought rose above all others. Run or die. I forced myself upright. My legs shook beneath me, but I turned toward the river. Branches cut my face and arms as I crashed through the forest. I did not slow down. When I finally reached the edge of the trees, I saw the steamer. For 1 second, relief filled me. Then a gunshot cracked across the night. A bullet passed near my shoulder. The captain stood on the deck holding a revolver. "You must reach the mound," he shouted. The old ones demanded. He raised the weapon again. "I am your engine, my lords. I keep rolling on." He fired. I threw myself to the ground. The bullet missed and struck the muddy bank. I crawled toward the trees as another shot rang out. That bullet hit a trunk behind me. The branches above shook. For a moment, I thought I heard the trees scream. A terrible idea entered my mind. What if the forest was not simply a place where an old one lived? What if the entire forest was part of its body?